You can walk through walls, and I'm about to prove it using the most mind-shattering physics experiment ever. Right now, as you read this, you think solid barriers are absolute. You believe that when you push against a wall, it stops you completely because matter can't pass through matter. But here's the truth that will demolish everything you believe about solid objects. You are tunneling through matter constantly. Every second, every breath, every heartbeat. The atoms in your hand are passing through the atoms in whatever you're touching right now. Not metaphorically, not approximately, actually passing through in direct violation of everything your senses tell you about reality. But it gets worse, much worse. Every time you touch something, quantum mechanics says there's a calculable probability that your entire hand will tunnel completely through it. The probability is unimaginably small, but it's not zero. Feynman revolutionized our understanding of this impossible truth in his QED, The Strange Theory of Light and Matter. What you call solid barriers are actually probability waves that usually reflect quantum particles, but sometimes allow them to pass through. The reason you can't walk through walls isn't that it's impossible, it's that it's incredibly improbable. You're not stopped by physical barriers, you're stopped by statistics. But wait, there's something even stranger about how quantum tunneling actually works. The particles making up your body don't behave like tiny billiard balls bouncing off surfaces. They behave like waves that can leak through barriers even when they don't have enough energy to go over them. Think about ocean waves hitting a seawall. Most of the wave reflects back, but some water splashes over and through cracks. Quantum particles do something similar, except they can splash through solid matter with no cracks at all. Your electrons, protons, and neutrons are constantly tunneling into and out of objects around you. The electromagnetic fields that make up your body are overlapping with the electromagnetic fields of everything in your environment. The boundary between you and not you is fuzzy, probabilistic, and constantly shifting at the quantum level. But here's the kicker. This quantum tunneling isn't just happening to individual particles, it's happening on scales that affect the entire universe. The sun is shining because of quantum tunneling. Nuclear fusion in the sun's core requires protons to overcome enormous electromagnetic barriers to get close enough to fuse. Classically, this is impossible. The protons don't have enough energy. But quantum mechanically, protons tunnel through these electromagnetic barriers billions of times per second. Without quantum tunneling, the sun would be dark, Earth would be frozen, and you wouldn't exist. Every photon that lights your world exists because of particles doing something that classical physics says is impossible. And here's the part that will break your brain completely. Quantum tunneling happening in your body right now is enabling every biological process that keeps you alive. DNA replication, protein synthesis, neural transmission, cellular respiration, all of it depends on electrons tunneling through molecular barriers. The synapses firing in your brain as you read this sentence work because electrons tunnel across gaps between neurons. Your thoughts exist because particles are constantly passing through barriers that should stop them. Consciousness itself might depend on quantum tunneling effects in the microtubules of your neurons. You're not just occasionally tunneling through matter, you are a quantum tunneling process that has learned to think about itself. But it gets even more disturbing. Every piece of technology around you exploits quantum tunneling. The USB flash drive storing your photos works because electrons tunnel through insulating barriers to get trapped in floating gates. Flash memory is quantum mechanics made practical. Scanning tunneling microscopes can image individual atoms by measuring the tunneling current between a sharp tip and a surface. We can literally see atoms because particles tunnel through the empty space between the microscope and the sample. Tunnel diodes in your electronics work by exploiting quantum tunneling to create components that work faster and more efficiently than classical electronics allow. You're surrounded by devices that function because engineers have learned to harness the impossible. According to Feynman's path integral formulation, quantum tunneling reveals something profound about the nature of reality itself. Particles don't just take the path of least resistance, they simultaneously explore every possible path, including paths that go through solid barriers. As he explained in the Feynman Lectures on physics, the probability of finding a particle somewhere is determined by adding up the amplitudes for all possible paths to that location, including impossible paths that tunnel through infinite barriers. Your hand doesn't just push against a wall, It simultaneously explores billions of possible paths, including paths where it phases through the wall completely. The reason you feel resistance is that the probability amplitudes for tunneling paths are overwhelmingly smaller than the amplitudes for reflection paths. But those tunneling paths never go to zero. They're always there, contributing to the quantum mechanical calculation that determines what you experience as solid matter. Wait, there's one final revelation that will destroy everything you think you know about barriers and boundaries. Quantum tunneling operates on every scale in the universe, from subatomic particles to potentially macroscopic objects. There's no fundamental size limit to tunneling, only probability limits. Theoretically, you could tunnel through a wall, your entire body, all at once appearing on the other side without breaking the wall. The probability is so small that it would take longer than the age of the universe to have a reasonable chance of happening, but quantum mechanics doesn't forbid it. In fact, it predicts it. The universe is constantly calculating the probabilities for every possible quantum tunneling event. Right now, it's calculating the odds of your coffee mug tunneling through your table, your car tunneling through your garage door, your entire house tunneling to the other side of the planet. These calculations never stop. The universe is a vast quantum computer running infinite tunneling simulations and selecting outcomes based on probability amplitudes. As Feynman understood in 6 Easy Pieces, this reveals something disturbing about the nature of physical law. What you experience as solid, impenetrable barriers are actually statistical regularities emerging from quantum mechanical calculations. The laws of physics aren't really laws, they're probability distributions. And tunneling shows us that those distributions never completely forbid anything, no matter how impossible it seems. But here's what really shatters your understanding of barriers and boundaries. If particles can tunnel through any barrier, and if you're made of particles, then the concept of inside and outside becomes meaningless at the quantum level. The particles making up your brain are tunneling into and out of your skull constantly. The atoms in your heart tunnel through your rib cage. The molecules in your DNA tunnel through the nucleus of every cell. You don't have a physical boundary, you have a probability distribution that's highly concentrated in a roughly human-shaped region of space, but extends infinitely outward with decreasing probability. According to quantum field theory, your quantum fields overlap with the quantum fields of everything around you. You're not separate from your environment, you're a localized excitation in the universal quantum field system. Right now, virtual particles are tunneling in and out of existence in the space between your atoms. Real particles are tunneling between your body and everything around you. The electromagnetic radiation from your body is tunneling through walls, floors, and buildings to reach distant detectors. You are not contained within your skin. You are a quantum tunneling process temporarily organized into a pattern complex enough to wonder about its own boundaries. Let's return to where we started. You can walk through walls. Does that make sense now? You're not a solid object that bounces off barriers. You're a quantum mechanical system where tunneling probabilities determine your interactions with other quantum mechanical systems. The reason you don't tunnel through walls isn't that the universe forbids it, it's that the universe makes it statistically negligible while keeping it mathematically possible. When you touch a surface, quantum tunneling calculations are determining the probability that your hand will pass through versus the probability that it will be repelled. The repulsion wins overwhelmingly, but the tunneling possibility never disappears. Tomorrow, when you feel solid barriers stopping you, remember, you're experiencing the macroscopic manifestation of quantum tunneling statistics. The barriers are real, but they're probabilistic rather than absolute. The walls around you aren't impenetrable fortresses. They're quantum mechanical probability filters that make certain outcomes overwhelmingly likely while keeping impossible outcomes mathematically possible. You don't live inside barriers. You live inside probability distributions. And somewhere in those distributions, no matter how unlikely, there's always a path through every wall, every mountain, every planet. The tunneling never stops. The possibilities never disappear. And somehow, impossibly, beautifully, those quantum mechanical calculations have organized themselves into patterns complex enough to contemplate their own ability to tunnel through the barriers of space and time. You are quantum tunneling made conscious, and that might be the most impossible thing in the universe. But here's the most disturbing part of all. This isn't just happening in exotic laboratory conditions. It's happening everywhere, all the time, on every scale imaginable. Right now, alpha particles from radioactive elements in your body are tunneling out of atomic nuclei and creating the natural background radiation that surrounds you. Carbon-14 atoms in your DNA are spontaneously tunneling through nuclear barriers to decay into nitrogen, changing the very molecular structure of your genetic code. The process is so fundamental that radioactive dating depends on it. We can determine the age of ancient artifacts because we know the statistical rates at which atoms tunnel out of nuclear barriers. Every Geiger counter click, every smoke detector alarm, every medical scan using radioactive tracers, all of it works because particles are constantly achieving the impossible by tunneling through barriers that should contain them forever. In your electronics, tunnel junctions and Josephson devices allow superconducting currents to flow across insulating barriers. These devices can detect magnetic fields so weak that they're millions of times smaller than Earth's magnetic field, all because electrons tunnel through barriers that classical physics says are impenetrable. The hard drive in your computer stores information by trapping electrons in quantum wells that they can only escape through tunneling. Every bit of data you save depends on quantum tunneling rates that have been precisely engineered to store information for decades. But it gets even more mind-bending when you consider what this means for the nature of identity itself. If the atoms in your body are constantly tunneling into and out of adjacent objects, then the boundary between your atoms and environmental atoms is constantly shifting. You're not a fixed collection of particles, you're a dynamic tunneling process. The oxygen you breathe tunnels through cellular membranes. The nutrients from food tunnel through intestinal walls. The neurotransmitters in your brain tunnel across synaptic gaps. You're not just made of matter that tunnels. You are a tunneling process that has become self-aware. As Feynman understood, this reveals something profound about existence itself. You're not a thing, you're a pattern of quantum tunneling events temporarily organized into a configuration complex enough to contemplate its own impossibility. Every thought emerges from electrons tunneling through neural barriers. Every memory depends on quantum tunneling rates in your brain's molecular machinery. Consciousness itself might be a quantum tunneling phenomenon where particles tunnel through the barriers of space and time to create the subjective experience of being a continuous self. You are quantum tunneling made conscious, and that might be the most incredible thing in the universe.